In this video, I'm going to share with you the 5 most common mistakes that candidates make during the case interview that ultimately end up getting them rejected, even though they were easy to solve. So in this video, you're going to find out what those mistakes are and how you can easily fix them so you don't make these same mistakes. If you're new to this channel, my name is Davis. I'm a former Bain consultant, recruiter, and the founder of My Consulting Offer. And here at My Consulting Offer, my team and I have helped over 800 people land their jobs at management consulting firms like McKinsey, Bain, and BCG. And we help candidates get jobs in management consulting firms, and that involves helping them pass the case interview. So in this video, I'm going to share with you the 5 common mistakes that people make that I have seen in my time at Bain, as well as the team have seen in their time at their respective firms, and the easy way that you can fix them. So how I'm going to do today is that I'm actually going to present it from things that you can do from the beginning of the interview all the way to the end. That way you can see where the common mistake actually happens during the case interview process. All right, let's begin. Common mistake number 1 is that candidates don't come prepared. And what I mean by this is 2 things. 1, they're mentally not prepared, and 2, they're physically not prepared. Mistake number 1 mentally is that when they're practicing with someone to master the case interview process, they're not practicing with the right people. What most candidates do is that they practice with friends or anyone who's willing to help them. Or second, they practice alone. This is like trying to make it to Wimbledon, but as a tennis player, you're either playing by yourself and hitting the wall, or you're playing with players who don't want to play tennis. Instead, what I recommend here is that you practice with people who know what they're doing. So this can be, for example, friends of yours who were interviewers at some of these consulting firms and know the process. And the second thing is physical. And what I mean by this is that for a lot of interviews, you're allowed to bring in extra stuff from the outside. So check the requirements. For example, for most firms, including McKinsey, Bain, BCG, you bring paper and pen in to help you solve the case. And one of the common mistakes that people make is their paper selection. So a lot of people, they just use regular copy paper or notebook paper. If you've done enough case practice at this point, you know that one of the most common mistakes that people make is in their math. In particular is when they're multiplying or adding up large numbers with a lot of zeros. This means that a lot of times your answer either includes an extra 0 or is missing a 0. So you get the math wrong regardless. Grid paper actually solves this. So when you do math, you'll be able to keep track of all the numbers and all the zeros, all the decimal spots, all the commas, and so forth. So you won't make the common mistake of getting your math wrong. So definitely invest a few extra dollars into grid paper, learn how to use it, because those few extra dollars could mean the difference between you getting or losing hundreds of thousands of dollars from being a consultant and getting that salary. So a few extra dollars spent on buying grid paper can actually save you that 6-figure salary in consulting. So don't skip out, use grid paper. Now you're in an interview. When an interview starts, one of the most common mistakes that I see is that a lot of candidates, before they go in, is that they use a framework that they learned from a book. There's one book, for example, that has you memorizing 14 frameworks, and another book that teaches you one framework that you use over and over again for every case. The problem with this is that interviewers have seen all these books. So let's say, for example, that you mastered both of the books, and in total, you have 15 frameworks to work with. Well, let's imagine that you're really smart and you memorized all 15 frameworks from both books, and you go into the interview. When the interview actually starts and you're given the prompt, you're only given about 60 seconds to 90 seconds to actually break out the framework that you're going to use. But let's imagine that you memorized it perfectly, so you can do this within 60 to 90 seconds. The moment you write it down and you're like, you know what, that's framework number 7 that I'm going to use here, because you can just recall things really quickly. But let's imagine you can actually do that. You memorize all the framework, you use your time well, and you write the framework out beautifully because you memorized it, and you turn your paper over, share it with the interviewer, and then the interviewer's thinking, wait, this candidate's just using a framework that they memorized from a book. You see, interviewers aren't stupid. They read the same books you did, because oftentimes maybe they even read the same book when they were interviewing during the process, and they've seen other candidates do this. So if you use a memorized framework without actually understanding how to build a framework, you're going to go in there and just get rejected, because there's no way that you're going to stand out. Because at best, you do everything that I mentioned, which is you memorize the frameworks perfectly, you know which one to use, and you're able to write it down really quickly, and the interviewer thinks, wow, this person's really good at memorization. And at worst, you fumble because you don't know which framework to use, you use the wrong one, and then your chances of even solving the case goes down to 0 before you even get started. So instead of trying to memorize frameworks, learn how to build frameworks, and it's actually fun and easy. In fact, I have a whole series about that I walk you through how to build frameworks. I'll link that in the description below. After a candidate starts the case, builds their framework, the third mistake I see is that they don't ask for pauses, especially in the analysis part. So oftentimes when you're doing an interview, you could feel really stressed, like I have to continue to talk, I have to move this case forward, time's running out, I got to keep going. But oftentimes you make mistakes. For example, you rush through your math, or you look at a graph and you miss an obvious insight because you were rushing through it. Take the opportunity to pause and to actually think. In a real life consulting case, you actually take pauses. So if you're in a meeting, oftentimes when I was in a meeting and a client asked me a question I didn't understand, my impulse might have been to answer right away to make sure that I seem smart, but the smarter answer is that I'll say, can I take a moment to think about this? And oftentimes in a real case, that could take hours or even a day or a week, depending on the type of question. But in a case interview, if you're lost and flustered, just take a moment to pause. You can literally ask, great, could I have a moment to gather my thoughts? Simple as that. So don't miss your opportunity to ask for a pause. At best, this pause allows you to gain insight into what you're doing and solve the case better. And at worst, you ask and the interviewer says no, but at least you asked. The fourth mistake that I see also happens in the analysis, which is that oftentimes the interviewer will hint at you to go into a certain direction. So I get it. When you're in the middle of an interview, it can feel really heated, you feel stressed, and you just want to solve the case. And oftentimes the interviewer is actually there to try to help you. They're there to try to figure out how to get you to have a great experience in the case interview. So if they say, maybe we should look at this, or have you thought about this? Oftentimes, especially in first round interviews, this is a hint for you to take to get you back in direction. If you don't take it, then it could be seen as if you're not coachable and that you're very stubborn and you won't take feedback. The exception to this is during final round interviews, oftentimes your interviewers will do what's called a stress test, which is they want to see that you are staying true to your convictions and that you can defend yourself there. So during final rounds, you have to make a distinction between, is this person stress testing me or is this person telling me that I'm actually going the wrong direction? But 9 out of 10 times in a first round interview, that hint is actually helping you go. The fifth common mistake that I see a lot of candidates make happen towards the end of the case. When the case is wrapping up and the interviewer asks, great, could you summarize what's happening? Or could you provide a recommendation for our client? The mistake that a lot of candidates make here is that they have to reinvent the wheel every single time they're doing a structure. It's kind of like if you had to write a book and you're thinking about the structure differently every single time. The mistake here is that you risk losing time and missing key information. So instead, for the recommendation, I actually recommend that you use a structure here and use a structure that's actually used at consulting firms. So there's a structure that I like to use when it comes to giving recommendations that I learned during my time in consulting. It was actually the framework that I used when I was giving recommendations to our clients, and it's called the 5 R's framework. And how it works is this. First, you provide the recap. What was the problem you're trying to solve? Second, you provide the recommendation. Third, you give the reasons for why you provided that recommendation. Fourth, you list any risk to your recommendation being wrong. Finally, you provide an idea for how you can retain the client. That is, continue to work with them. The reason why the 5 R's works so well is that it's structured in a way that consultants love to communicate with executives, especially CEOs of big companies. And you can use the 5 R's framework because when you use this and get good at it, every single time that you run through a case interview, you'll immediately, when you reach the recommendation part of the case, know exactly what you need to write out. And it saves you a lot of time. I'll provide a link below where you can learn more about the 5 R's so you can learn the why it's used, how it's used, and what you can use it for. But you don't want to go into the recommendation section of the case without having a framework to help you. So those are the 5 common mistakes that a lot of candidates make when they go into the case interview that's easily avoidable. And I want to make sure that you don't make these same mistakes. If you're serious about becoming a management consultant, I'd love to help you. My team and I are former McKinsey, Bain, and BCG recruiters and interviewers who help applicants land interviews, prepare for their assessments, and pass the interviews so that they can land their offers at firms like McKinsey, Bain, BCG, and so many other amazing consulting firms. And for a limited time, you can access this training all for free. In it, we share with you the step-by-step proven process that has helped over 1,000 people land their consulting offers at some of the biggest firms in the world. And all you have to do to access this training is to check out the link below. And the proven method that you're going to learn in this workshop, we've used to help 90% of the people we work with land at least one consulting offer. In fact, many land multiple offers. And we're going to give it to you away for free. All you have to do to gain access to this is to check out the link below. Joining this workshop could put you one step closer to landing your dream consulting offer.